much easier. Right, let's rearrange these.
It's working this.
Very sense. We want that. Hello. So about itself. The other way. Stay. Well, this is 1984 now, because we're going backwards in time. And 1984 was the newest year of freedom. And in 1984 I started in London. Every day making the stencil daily action. So here we have the first sheet for January 1984. And what I was doing at this time, I was recording every action during the day, its time, what I did. For example, 0902, telephone rings, scramble out of bed to clutch at shirt. And at this time I was living at 57 Messina Avenue in West Hampstead. This was the home that belonged to Jeanette and Cornelius, who were friends of my sister. They'd gone off to Austria for a skiing holiday, so I was looking after their house while they were out of London. So every day, as I said, I did the daily action and recorded everything that I did during the day. So every month I collected these sheets and put them with the correspondence that I had each month into separate folders. So each folder contains the correspondence that was sent to me at this time, as well as all the daily action sheets that I made. So we come through and into March. March was a very sort of typical month in London. I had more correspondence in March because I was starting to organise the 8th newest apartment festival. So there was a lot of organisation to be done at this time. I had moved from West Hampstead to Alton Place in Kennington. Alton Place was a 3-storey house which was rented by Stephen Thorne, who was a playwright and a writer of scripts for dramas, etc. So I continued to do the data sheets every day in March, the same, recording the hours of the day and what I did at particular times. Also recording my movements around London and documenting the organisation of the apartment festival. So we can just see basically how these were put together. So during this time I was working on a lot of different images of London. A lot of images which were about aggression in London. And in this book, in this box rather, we have 3 different books which were made in 1984. As I say, at the beginning of the year I was working on a book about London, which is this one. It has colour Xeroxes in it, which were made from slides. It's very difficult actually to organise this space. I think maybe if I just zoom the camera back a bit. It's easier just to show the composition of this book. Each page is, yeah, it's better to move back, that's right. It has text on it and colour Xeroxes, which I said were made from slides direct on the colour Xerox machine.
So every copy of the book contained a colour Xerox?
No, these were then Xeroxed in black and white, yeah, for an edition. I made a very small edition of these. The text's about living in London, about stealing things out of shops because I had very little money, and about getting free vegetables and fruit from the big market, picking up the trash vegetables and fruit every morning so that I could feed myself and feed people that were visiting Alton Place prior to the apartment festival. And the first person to arrive was Istvan Kantor, who came to stay for some time so that we could discuss the preparations to the apartment festival. This page shows Istvan at the top there, and myself underneath. This is from a Super 8 which I did with Ben Allen when he came to visit. And this is another picture of Istvan Kantor wearing a fish hat on his head. This is a picture of the very famous golden Neoist chapati. And this is an image of making the chapati. I made a whole slide program about how to make chapatis. Okay, during May, this is the folder for May. Let's just try and, can't really see it very well, it's a little difficult because the table's getting very crammed up now. But during May we had the apartment festival. So this is all the correspondence that came in during May, which was used during the apartment festival. We pinned it all up on the walls, etc. And all this time, of course, I was continuing to make the daily data sheets, recording each day with the stencil action and recording every movement and everything that I was doing during the day. So that part of the main reason for going to London for the beginning of 1984 was to organise this apartment festival. It had been planned about 6 months in advance. So the majority of this documentation in here is for the newest apartment festival book. I can see here is the original design for the cover. This is a PMT photograph of a chapati. It was put onto a process camera and the print was made directly from the chapati. You can see how it looks like a planet, an alien planet. Well, the idea...
Akademgorod.
That's right, that was the idea. Was that the planet was Akademgorod, yeah. And that the festival actually happened on another planet rather than just Earth. So in the text for the book, it's very mythological. There's a lot of things which didn't happen and things which did happen, mixed with the absolute reality of the events. So all of these pages, as I say, these are the original layouts for the book. This is Yanto the Wonder Dog. He was a fantastic mythological creature who lived in Alton Place with us. Well, Yanto the Wonder Dog used to wear a dog mask. This was his disguise. He liked to disguise himself as another dog and go around, so he used to wear this dog mask. And this is tentatively a convenience from Baltimore, wearing a goat mask. He used to go to London Zoo quite regularly to entertain the animals there, and he used to wear different masks when he went to London Zoo to entertain the animals. This is Pete Horobin arriving in London by helicopter. He came from Scotland, direct to direct to London by helicopter. There we go. That's a bit better. So you can see coming out of the helicopter there, landing on this pod in the middle of the River Thames. It's a kind of floating heliport, yeah? So, we have various drawings inside the book. Carlo Pittore came to London for the Apartment 8 festival, and this is Carlo wearing a bread hat, a newest bread hat. And then this is a drawing of a performance by Yanto. It was this performance by Yanto was done during a smaller performance by Istvan Kantor, who was doing an opening speech for the Apartment 8 festival. But I think Yanto managed to upstage him by doing this death-defying leap right over the flaming bread hat that Istvan was wearing at the time. It was a fantastic performance, you know, probably the best, newest apartment festival performance ever, I think. So there's basically a page for each day of the apartment festival with pieces of collage material that were mailed from different people. So included in here you see are the original data sheets which were made during the Apartment 8 festival. Again, with the stencil action and what happened at the times during the apartment festival itself. So it's very accurate and direct documentation. And this is a drawing of the people who were most directly involved in the Apartment 8 festival. Tentatively a convenience: Litvinov, Stuart Home, Pete Horobin, Istvan Kantor and his girlfriend Marie.
What are these stickers about?
Well, during the apartment festival we had a lot of different things sent in from people in the network, either photographs of their own activities, collages, notes, diagrams, various things that could be exhibited in the apartment during the festival, you see, and various scripts for participants of the apartment festival to perform. Robin Crozier in Sunderland sent a whole series of these little white cards.
Oh, that's white.
Well, I'm coming to that. And each card had a word on it. This particular card says table, and in brackets, or table of contents, close brackets, open brackets, or the table contents, close brackets, and signed Robin Crozier. So before the apartment festival started, I took all these cards and nailed them or pinned them onto the objects related to by the word. This particular card was nailed onto the table which we used in the kitchen to eat all our meals off, yeah. So it was kept on that particular table during the apartment festival, so that it collected all the dirt, and in a sense it collected its own documentation of the apartment festival. And then after the apartment festival I took all the cards off the various objects, etc., and used them in the documentation. This one here is so eroded that it is impossible now to read what the word was originally. I can't personally remember.
I think it looked like floor.
It possibly was, yeah. It looks like floor, because this one's curtain and it's not damaged at all. I think it was just tacked onto a curtain. And then of course this one says handle, and I think it was put onto a door handle. It's not really damaged either. For the close of the festival we had a ceremony in the River Thames where all the participants of the festival launched small boats and sailed them down the river, which was like giving part of ourselves back to the River Thames at the end of the festival. So these two drawings here show actions from that particular ceremony. This is tentatively a convenience sewing together a carp which Istvan Kantor had cut to pieces and destroyed, so tentatively sewed it back together again and threw it into the River Thames. I was wearing a gold chapati suit for making chapatis during the festival, so I signed it and then set fire to it and put it back into the River Thames. And that's basically the end of the Apartment 8 festival. But as a final gesture, I photographed everyone who had participated. I took their portraits and in exchange gave them a copy of the London book, which you saw the originals of earlier. Most of these people I still correspond with very strongly. Stuart Home, who I met for the first time during the lead up to the apartment festival, and tentatively a convenience, so I met for the first time then. I still correspond with these people. So I should show you this one actually, this Yanto the mystery dog. It's a portrait of him. After the apartment festival he changed back into a human being and went back to South America. And we don't get very much correspondence from him now. I think he's doing undercover work. So after the apartment festival I came back to Scotland and started to do a different project which was related directly again to the year of freedom. So I need now to get to this other box, which I think, is it? Can I see? Yeah, it is. It's this one. So I came back to Scotland at the beginning of August and took up residence in Dysart again, and every day I stenciled the date, but I no longer did it on separate sheets of paper. I did it continually on the one sheet, and each day this date was stenciled, so we have 8 consecutive days on each sheet. So at this time I was planning the walk across Scotland with a pram. We had found a pram in London, in Alton Place, in the garden shed, and it was in very bad condition. But I couldn't find a better pram in Scotland, you see, so I phoned Stuart Home up in London. He was living by this time in Alton Place, and I asked him to deliver the pram to Scotland for me.
What's a pram?
Oh, sorry. You don't know what a pram
No.
is? Well, we'll come to that. Well, you'll see photographs of the pram, so it'll become very obvious what a pram is. Actually, it's a baby carriage. So every day I was planning the trip with the pram and doing these stencil actions. And planning other things at the same time. I did this photograph while I was hanging around in Dysart waiting for Stuart to arrive with the pram. These are photographs of earthworms, which were later used by Stuart in one of his Smile magazines. They're a bit glossy, the light's kind of bouncing off them a bit, but you can see that they're quite well detailed. Right, well, this photograph shows the discovery of the pram here. You can just make it out. This is the day it was discovered in Alton Place in London. And then we have a couple of sheets showing the pram being taken by Stuart Home to King's Cross railway station in London. This is Stuart leaving Alton Place on his way to Scotland with the pram. And this is him putting it into a taxi to take it up to King's Cross station. These photographs were taken by Eugenie Vincent, who was also living in London at the time. She was working as a model for various magazines and agencies. And this is Stuart just about to get the pram onto the train at King's Cross station. So I had to get the pram in Dysart and prepare it for its trip across Scotland. These pages now are from the book of the documentation about that particular journey. I used some quotes from other famous writers as part of the book. This is the quote which I like the best. There are various kinds of classes of bums in Paris. The high-class bum has a dog and a baby carriage in which he keeps all his belongings, and that usually consists of old France soirs, rags, tin cans, empty bottles, broken dolls. This bum sometimes has a mistress who follows him and his dog and carriage around. That was written by Jack Kerouac. And this photograph shows the pram when it was all cleaned up and ready for its journey, and all the belongings that I took in the pram with me. I had a complete art studio in the pram, a tent, the rubber rooster which was given to me in London by Tentatively a Convenience, shaving equipment, toilet equipment, change of clothes, cooking stove, etc., etc., etc. So I guess the total contents of the pram weighed somewhere around 60 pounds. It was pretty heavy. So every time I camped with the pram, every night I camped in a different location. I would put the tent up and I hung the rubber rooster outside of the tent, because when I first saw the rubber rooster it was hanging on Tentatively a Convenience, so it was a kind of continuation of that image. And I also, outside the tent, made this symbol in stones to mark a particular place of newest activity and energy. Underneath each photograph of each campsite is a small note, just a sort of brief diary type note, giving the location, what the weather was like, how many miles I'd done each day, kind of thing. These are the actual pages which I made on transit. I carried, as I said, my entire studio with me. So I recorded the day with the stencil action like I'd done throughout 1984 and every other year during the data project, and the time that I got up and all the different times during the day that I did various actions, when I stopped for lunch, etc., etc., and the approximate distance in miles every day. This particular day I did about 14 miles. So I walked from Dysart in Fife, where I was living at the time, right across Scotland to a small village on the west coast called Mallaig. I had originally decided to go a lot further. I wanted to be on the road with the pram for about a month, because I could afford to do that. I had enough money to go for that sort of distance. I wanted to walk about, I don't know, 600 miles or something like that. But I only managed to go about 250 or 270 miles. And the reason that I stopped in Mallaig was that the back tyres on the pram were falling to pieces very rapidly. There was so much weight in the pram that I was pushing down all the time on the back wheels to move it across the roads, etc. So all the pressure was on the back tyres and lumps of rubber were just flying off all the time. So I thought, well, I better stop in my leg before the tyres just shred off completely. So after the pram, I was just looking actually to see what date the pram trip finished. I can't really... It was sometime in August that the pram trip finished. After that I returned to Dysart, where I stayed for the winter of '84, and I started a project there called Fife Man, because Dysart is in Fife, and the Fife dialect is very distinctive and very interesting. So I started to write about living in Fife and being a Fife man. And during this time, of course, I was still making these sheets. I was recording every day, like so. And I was doing some different actions in Fife. Dysart is a mining village. You can see here the pit head, a photograph of the pit head. So I did a few actions which were about coal and salt, because Dysart in the 15th century had made its economy by selling salt to Europe. So Dysart was very much a black and white village, so I used black and white in the Fife man mythology all the time. I dressed all the time in black and white and created this character called Fife Man. So part of the Fife Man project was to send correspondence sheets to everybody in the network that I was communicating with. There's nothing much in here actually. So I go down to another box, another gold box, because gold is the newest colour, and this was a very newest year, 1984. So in here we have the Fife Man sheets, which was a big correspondence project. What I did was I started each sheet in Dysart, and each sheet would be started by rubber stamp and typing on a piece of text or doing something on the sheet and then mailing it to another person. And what I did was I sent 6 sheets at a time to a particular person and asked them then to complete the pages. This one was finished by Robin Crozier, and this one was finished by Phil Pilkington, who at that time was living in Dundee. I think it'd be a good idea if you change the camera angle a bit so we can just look through them easily. So I'll just go through these pretty quickly so that you get a rough idea of what the Fife Man book was like. When I did the edition of the Fife Man book, I Xeroxed it in black and white, of course, so a lot of the quality got lost completely. This was a page done by Stuart Hone. Robin Crozier again. So I was writing little pieces of text, like I said, typing them, doing little pieces of drawings. So the symbols on each sheet are part Fife, and then this one's part Italy. This was completed by Emilio Morandi in Ponte Nosa. This drawing here is a very distinctive symbol of Dysart. This is the three-legged Dalmatian, which used to limp around in Dysart. It's a very mythical dog. Mythical because it was black and white, like Dysart itself, half salt, half cold, but only had 3 legs, which I thought was very interesting, because the dog was a cripple, and Dysart was a crippled town, because its economy was failing. So I used the dog quite often. And I also used the rubber rooster, of course, very regularly. Also done by Emilio Morandi, another Stuart Home. And this is completed by Mark Paulson. And this one by Vittore Baroni. I think this one was completed by Ben Allen. You can tell by the various helicopter designs on it. This is really a small mail art project. By that I mean that very few people participated in it, because it was a very intimate project. It was only people that I knew and had known through correspondence for like a very sort of private periods of time, I guess. This is a Ryusuke Koen sheet. And another Ben Allen. Everyone has a very distinctive style, actually. This is a Rod Summers. Very minimalistic gesture. Another Ryusuke Koen. I think this was, yep, it is. It's Jürgen Kirschbell from Germany. This is his little symbol here. I had a very strong correspondence with Jürgen at this time, but I don't hear from him anymore. I haven't heard from him for about 3 years. I guess he's still doing correspondence though, huh?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I've also lost correspondence with him, contact with him.
Yeah. I've seen his name in some catalogues recently, but he doesn't write to me. This is another of his sheets. So I sent 6 sheets to a person, and they then completed them and sent them back, and I would send them another 6 sheets. And I did that until each person had done 18 sheets. but not every person completed 18 sheets. Some people only completed 6, some people completed 12, until I decided to finish the project. So I think altogether there are 92 pages of the Fife-Man correspondence project. This was completed by Jack Saunders, who's a writer in Florida. He never uses any image material, he only does typed material. This was completed by Stuart Hone, but after this time he gave the rubber stamp to Mark Pawson. So Mark Pawson now stamps things fake instead of Stuart Hone. This was completed by Tentatively a Convenience. And this was also completed by Tentatively a Convenience. You can see here is a drawing of the rubber rooster as it was in Dysart. And this photograph is the rubber rooster before it travelled to London at the beginning of 1984, before it was actually given to me in London. Photographed hanging up in Tentatively's apartment in Baltimore. Very subtle sheet by Ben Allen, who was painting his apartment in London at the time, so he had a lot of white emulsion lying around. This is a Mark Pawson stencil of a rhinoceros. It's nice the way some of them are torn. That's how they came back to me. Slightly damaged. Quite textural. This was completed by Andy Stenhouse, who is a Scottish artist. He's now living in New York, trying to become famous. That's why people go to New York now. Another Vittori Baroni piece. So like I said, you can see that there weren't that many different artists involved in it. Yeah. Monty Canson still gets in there. You know. There were a lot of people, of course, that I sent sheets to who never sent them back. You know, didn't do anything to them at all, didn't correspond on the project.
You know, if you sent some to me.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, I can't
I didn't have no contact with you in 1984.
Yeah, I think so.
I know so. Yeah, because I didn't get contact with you until I went to Pontenosa a year later. Some of them are quite detailed actually, where other ones are obviously done very quickly. This is finished by Andy Stenhouse, who does a lot of tight little gestures with the rotring pen. These ones were finished by Peter Bieler in Würzburg, and I don't know what material Peter used on this, but they came back very oily and very waxy. So I laid them out in my studio on sheets of newspaper to try and dry them, but they never ever dried at all. You can see that's still wet. So I put them inside these plastic sheets so that they wouldn't stain the rest of the pages. It's a very strange material, and I wrote to him and asked him what he'd used, but he never replied, so I never figured it out for myself. It's another Mark Pawson.
Neoism.
Another Peter Bieler. I like these actually. Got a nice colour and texture to them. It's nice having them in the plastic envelopes, makes them quite different from the other ones.
Yeah.
It's a Jürgen Kirschmann. Isn't it, who that was? So I remember it being very cold when I did these, because this was winter and living by the sea in Fife it was very cold. It didn't actually snow, but because it was by the North Sea it was bloody freezing. I can remember being in the studio doing these sheets in the morning, you know, blue with the cold. It was really, really freezing. So a lot of the text is about being cold and about being very miserable and having to sustain myself on very little money, being on welfare payments. So I finished the project in December 1984, thereby bringing 1984, the newest year of freedom, to a conclusion in my own studio in Dysart. A year which had started in London, had travelled across Scotland, and then come to rest in Dysart. I think the final sheet was actually concluded by Vittore Baroni, if I remember rightly. Just get down to the final sheet, which is this one. 26/12/84. The day after Christmas, 1984. completed by Pete Horobin, How to be a Successful Newest Artist. This is the 1982 and 1983 box of Data Daily Actions. It's a little wooden case containing these objects here. This is the box for January 1983, the first of the year. In 1983 I was making a Super 8 every month. So each Super 8 is different, and it's about little actions and things that interested me during the month. Every day I was making the daily actions with the stencil as before and after, but I was keeping them all on one sheet like so. So that the entire month is on the sheet, which then folds up and goes into the case like so. And in actual fact, every single one of these is the same, except that the film inside is different subject matter. So it was a different way of recording the year. In 1982 we had a very similar situation, but during 1982 I was making an audio cassette every month. This audio cassette is a master mix of all the different material that I was recording during the month. So at the end of each month I took all the data cassettes and mixed them down into something which was more solid, more to do with what had happened during the month. Also in this book I record the mail out during the month, and have a record of the daily actions. And a little thing in the back, just a kind of souvenir of each month. So it's very much a kind of sound book, all more or less the same, but again with a different mix inside, different cassette mix. Well, this one is the newest training camp cassette. When I went over to Würzburg in June 1982, at the invitation of Peter Bilo, I took with me my Philips data audio recorder and recorded all the events during the newest training camp, then came back and mixed them all down into one master cassette, which I kept as the cassette for the month of June. That's just a kind of letter thing there, and again a list of all the mail that I sent out during that month. A little souvenir at the back of the newest network's first European training camp. This is the program during the week, program of actions and events. I think the cameras had a little look at that. The lighting's not very great. Gives you an idea of what it was like. And then the stencil actions are inside again. So you can see that 82 and 83 were a different approach to cataloguing and documenting the year's activities. So each year, 82 and 83, was really about a different approach to documenting and cataloguing the daily actions. I'm still doing audio work and I'm still doing Super 8 work. And I'm putting them together now and making video projects. So 82 and 83 were kind of experimental leading up to video. But during these 2 years I was also doing other work, correspondence and other projects, but this is the main bulk of the daily actions.
God.
Yep.
Yes. Red light.
Well, this is the first book for 1981. This is a big plastic binder, and inside A4 plastic sheets containing the daily actions for January 1981. You can see at the beginning is a distribution list. What I used to do in 1981 was photocopy the daily actions at the end of every month and make them into a kind of loose magazine which would go into a data envelope, and these were mailed out to various people who I was in contact at that time. So the distribution list is really a correspondence guide. I was stenciling the date as usual at the beginning of the page and rubber stamping here and writing in the location. This location says Paris, so at the beginning of 1981 I was in Paris working with a group called Cairn. And also doing a piece of correspondence work with Peter Bilo. Peter Bilo had mailed me this book just before I left Dundee to go to Paris. So I took the book with me. His instruction was to do something with the book and then pass it on. So I took the book to pieces and tore up the pages into small pieces and threw the small pieces into the River Seine. They then floated on the current down the River Seine, past the Louvre and out to sea. I then put this documentation, or should I say I put photocopies of this documentation back into the book and sent it on to Peter Bilo. That was one of the first mail art projects that I participated in. By 7/1/81 I had moved on to Milano, where I was asked to put on an exhibition of data in Centro Lavoro Arte. Here we can see some photo documentation of my exhibition at Centro Lavoro Arte. It was a very small gallery, just with a small shop window here and a doorway. I'll wait for the cameraman to catch up with me now. Can you see that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? On the other page we have some photo documentation of the vernissage. I projected some data images here onto a screen and had photocopies of my daily actions and projects on the walls and lying around in books. big die-line posters were on the walls. So really these photographs show who was present rather than what the work was like. Photographs were taken by one of the Italian group members. So I left Milano on the 10th of January 1981 and returned to Dundee on the 12th of January 1981. And every day I was making these actions and putting them into these books. And the reason that I was able to keep them in plastic folders like this was that there was no photocopy involved. It's all original rubber stamp and ink. If I put photocopies into these plastic binders, then the plastic would destroy the photocopies. So this kind of action continued in 1981. And if I go to this book, which is for May, you can see that the distribution list is quite small for May. Most of these people are actually living in Great Britain. Also in here is some documentation about an action that I did in Edinburgh. Involving members of a public who were in attendance at a big performance festival event called the Electric Circus. And again we have the daily actions and some diagrams about another action that I did. It's very interesting for me to go through these actually, because I haven't seen them for about 5 years, so it's very strange. I really don't know what to say. I've forgotten what most of this is all about. But it's quite obvious that the daily action is continuing throughout the year. I then move on to the same year, August. The distribution correspondence list is bigger. I'm getting more and more involved in things by that time. I changed the stencil layout to a more arbitrary design, just by sort of dropping the stencils onto the page and then filling them in like so. Just kind of playing around with the design of the action rather than just doing it in a linear fashion as I had done beforehand. These are photocopies of correspondence that I was mailing out at the time. Small handmade books.
So you have photocopies in plastic?
Yeah, I do, yeah. They seem to be alright too, don't they? I don't think they're kind of falling to pieces. It's not recommended, you see, to put photocopies in plastic because the friction or the static pulls the carbon off, but these are okay. I don't know how many years it takes, so maybe it depends on the quality of the photocopy. But these are okay. Yeah. As I was saying, these are small handmade books. So I just obviously Xeroxed them before I mailed them away, just as a personal record. And these are the people that I was mailing them to. Richard Mead in Los Angeles. I don't have any contact with him anymore. It seems like a long time ago now. Andrzej Kudnecki from Poland. I don't hear from him anymore either. So that's 1981. That's the kind of format that I was using then.
Stop. Tape's end.
Has it? Just right on the...
Well, it's not. It's working.
Yeah, well, the light's still on. It hasn't switched itself off.
It's not really working.
It's not really working. Why?
It's a bit unsharp. Huh?
It's still running though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perhaps I can do something with it.
Well, I want you to
No, just
get down on the book here.
yeah.
Oh, you're wasting my time.
This is Pete Horobin.
Yeah, that's me. That's a good shot. I'm very happy with that shot, Graf.
And just until the tape's end.
Oh.
Oh, I see. So I can just kind of move around a bit.
It's just a few seconds.
That's all right, actually. That's quite nice. I can just... Oh, it's not working, is it? If I want to go into focus.
It's micro.
Oh, it's on micro, is it? Jimmy Micro. Hold it there. That's better. Well, this is what happens when letraset is stored underneath plastic. The plastic static just pulls the letraset to pieces. This is what I expected to happen to the photocopies. Well, this is the very first Data Daily Action book. It was started in January 1980. This is the month of daily actions, and at the front we have the distribution list. What I did every month was I photocopied the pages, made them into a loose leaf magazine and sent them off to friends and colleagues in the art world that I knew. Before I actually started the daily actions proper, I did a couple of prototypes just to see how I would work out the format. This is the first one that I made. It's a small plastic bag, 6 inches by 4 inches, with a few items of memorabilia collected during the day's events, with a header card folded and stapled over the bag, thereby sealing it. This is another prototype using a different letter form, and another prototype. And then I arrived at this idea for the very first one. I stenciled the date using ink and a brush, stamped in the ink onto the header card there, put a few items into the plastic bag and then sealed it and mounted it onto an A4 page. I did this every day, thereby building up a record of daily actions which not only recorded my existence on that particular day, but also a few pieces of memorabilia. Also in the book are a few items that I was working on at the time. This is a photograph without the use of a camera. And a few written pieces. And these pages, as I say, were photocopied and distributed to various people. And through these mailings, I became known by the Mail Art Network and was gradually drawn into an international correspondence. So I kept this form going through the months of 1980. So that you can see by April I'm still doing the same format, still putting things into small plastic bags, stenciling the date, sealing the bag, mounting it onto A4. And then I decided to come out of the bag and go more for a collage drawn image using the whole freedom of the A4 page. I was beginning to feel restricted by the small plastic bag. I guess I really wanted to produce images again rather than just seal things up in small plastic bags. So I started to make an image for every day using the stenciled action as the beginning of the image. Using pieces of found objects which were lying around the office that I was working in. Also using pieces of my own photography. And again, these were photocopied at the end of every month and mailed out to people. And then at the end of 1980, December, just gradually beginning to peel off here, the letter set. This is the distribution. By that time I was in contact with Centro Lavoro Arte and the Basement Group in Newcastle and Vittore Baroni in Italy. So Vittore was one of the first people in the International Nail Art Network to make contact with me. By this time I had changed my page format. I'd designed a letterhead. This also was the form that I used on large envelopes. The envelopes were used for mailing the photocopies. This is a visit to Newcastle. I went down there to have a look at the basement, a very small underground gallery which was run by the Basement Group. They wanted me to go down and do an exhibition or installation of my work there, so I went down to check out the space. So that's the beginning of data. And that's how it all started. And that's how my correspondence adventure started, which led me to meet people like Graf Haufen and start the data attic in Dundee. Mr. Haufen, would you like to come into the data attic? Yeah.
Oh,
Do you go to her every time?
yeah, mostly. We just talk about it. I don't know.
Does she speak German?
A bit. I don't know. I'm always scared to cut holes in it. And they're really short.
It's my ear I'm worried about.
Well.
I think maybe you're right, yeah? No, it's like this.
It's not.
It's too far maybe. No, it looks about right to me. What do you think?